Today we're going to talk about helping behaviors. Remember, this is related to the last chapter, but now it's the actual physical behaviors that imply helping, and it's an interesting thing because we could talk about liking and loving and all that stuff, and we tend to help people that we like more, but that's not the only thing. So the question is, who are you going to help? And there's a lot of factors involved, and we'll find that only a very small portion of the question, who are you going to help, will come down to personality. You know, oh, somebody with this kind of a personality. Well, no. It just doesn't come down to that. It's much more likely to come down to situational factors. Well, it depends will be the answer. So here's a good example to start with. 1982, Washington, D.C., a plane crashes into the water. It's all icy. A helicopter came to get the survivors out, but everybody was in shock. Nobody's grabbing the rope. The rope was just flopping around. So one guy, a bald guy in his 50s, he grabs the rope, okay? And so instead of putting himself, he grabs and he puts the rope in somebody else's hand, okay? And so the helicopter goes and picks him up and pulls the person in, and each time the helicopter came back, the man put the rope into the next person's hand. Now, every person in the plane crash was in fact rescued except the man who was doing all of the helping. So that's kind of crazy. Why did he do that? Why would this guy completely not just risk his life, but give his life for a bunch of random people on an airplane? He didn't know who they were. Okay. Well, that's an interesting thing. We like to hear stories like that. How about this one, however? This is unfortunately more realistic. This is a big one. This one, this is the story, and again, if you follow the link here, that will take you to a video. But Kitty Geneviese's story was originally buried on like page 29 or something of the New York Times. I mean, just way back in there. And nobody really noticed it for a while. But when somebody did, they was like, oh my goodness, is this real? Nobody could believe it. Okay, so she's a manager of a bar in Queens, New York. And so March 13, 1964, she's on her way home. It's 3 in the morning. Now, she has to park her car a fairly good distance away from her apartment because it is New York, right? You park wherever you can park. And she's attacked while walking from her car to her apartment building. And the guy starts to stab her on the street. And she's yelling and she's screaming, oh my God, he stabbed me. Help. Please, please help. And what happened was that a bunch of people opened the windows and leave that girl alone, you know. And the attacker, oh my God, takes off. And then Kitty Genovese is now all stabbed, but nobody went to help her, right? And about 5 minutes later, Kitty Genovese is just starting to gain her senses, and the attacker comes back and starts stabbing her and attacking her again. And she starts screaming, oh my God, he's killing me! Windows fly open, hey, get out of here, you know? And the attacker goes away, and Kitty Genovese somehow manages to just drag herself to her door. She's on the front step of her apartment building, and this attacker comes back a third time and finally finishes the job and kills her right on her front doorstep. Okay? There was 38 people that witnessed this event. 38. Now, the entire attack happened in across 35 minutes, okay? With the attacker leaving and returning 3 times. Now, what's up with this? Okay, I mean, I got it. Let's go back to that personality thing. I can envision a scenario where this balding dude is just some kind of a saint. I got it. All 38 of Kitty Genovese's neighbors are just selfish assholes. That is getting a little bit hard to believe. I mean, with probability theory, all 38 equaling the same thing equals pretty obscure probability. Okay? So the questions then become, why did the man in the first story give his own life to save others, and why did the neighbors of Kitty Genovese not even call the police? Okay? Not only did they not go down there and help her, but they didn't even call the cops. Oh yeah, one person did call the cops after she was dead. That there was, I mean, at least somebody did at some point, right? Finally, a good Samaritan. All right. So now we'll break down helping now that we have these fairly extreme examples. Altruism is a motive to increase another's welfare without conscious regard for one's own interests. This is kind of an odd thing that altruism is a difficult thing to envision. Let's say, for example, the simplest example is vervet monkeys. With vervet monkeys, when a vervet monkey sees an eagle coming, they go, ah, 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 and all the other monkeys, they go, boom, and they drop from the tree. Because, I mean, that call was like, dude, there's an eagle coming, watch out. And this vervet monkey, by making that call, has basically put a giant target on its head. He's going, ah, 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 which the eagle hears as, come eat me, here I am, okay? So basically, this behavior is not even just altruistic. Altruistic is to help somebody else with absolutely no intention of ever getting paid back. And in this case, this is a situation where there's helping and in fact harms you, puts you in harm's way, increases the probability that you die, like the balding dude in the river. Okay? And this is some hard stuff to understand, especially when you put this in light of evolutionary theory, because any behavior that increases the probability of death really should not be passed along to the next generation. That's just how it works. That kind of behavior ought to whittle itself out pretty quickly. All right, so I would argue that I am a pessimist, unfortunately. I wish I was a true optimist, but I am unfortunately in many ways a pessimist. And I would argue for something called egoism. A motive, or let's go back to social exchange theory. The theory that human interactions are in fact transactions, economic transactions, that aim to maximize one's rewards and minimize one's costs. I will only help you if I believe that the rewards I'm going to receive from it are larger than what I'm going to put into it. It would take an economically irrational creature, and nature does not create economically irrational creatures. It would take an economically irrational creature to help if you're not getting anything in return. So here's the thing, though, and that's what egoism, by the way, is this this motive to increase your own welfare. Okay, and here's the drill: is that this economic transaction that I make reference to could literally be in terms of money. I'll help you if you give me $20. I mean, it could be in terms of money. But it could also be in terms of other commodities that you value. You know, I'll help you if I believe other people are watching me and therefore I can look good in their eyes. I'll volunteer at the clinic if I can put it on my resume because I believe it'll give me something better down the road for a job. I will help if, and we find even Mother Teresa, given this type of a pessimistic scenario, even Mother Teresa is downright selfish because here she is, you know, she's helping these poor people in the gutters of Calcutta. And she's down there day after day after day. And what this maintains is that Mother Teresa is getting something. She's getting a good feeling. Getting, I don't know what you're going to call it, a feeling of blessedness, a feeling of, I mean, maybe it's like holier than thou belief. I don't know. Maybe she believes that she's getting spiritual points or something. She's getting something. Because even Mother Teresa is not economically irrational. Okay? And it is pessimistic, but I personally think it's an awfully good description of how helping behavior really is driven. Okay? It just looks funny because some people value things differently. Mother Teresa did not value money highly, but perhaps did value her spiritual relationship with God, and she felt that by helping others, it raised her spiritual relationship with God, which is something that she valued. Okay? She put a value on it. And so that is, in my mind, we are all ultimately selfish. And in fact, here it is. Helping behavior benefits the giver as well as the receiver. Like I said, people volunteer to pad their resume, and I can't read it, but it basically says, "There goes Sarah again, padding her college entrance resume." You know, and she's helping a little old lady across the street. Oy. Here's a really good quote: "Men do not value a good deed unless it brings a reward." Makes sense. I mean, we are selfish. What kinds of rewards also could be like avoidance of guilt. Okay. In this case, you're not getting paid something, but something negative is being taken away. Anybody remember their positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement? They're both reinforcement. This is negative reinforcement. That somebody's needing help, and I see them, and I start to feel guilty because I'm not helping them, so I help them to reduce the guilt. That is negative reinforcement. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. People in a good mood are more helpful. What was this? I forgot. What did they do? I don't remember. Whatever, I forgot. They put them in a good mood or something. I don't know what it was. Okay, whatever. But anyway, no, the feel-good, do-good phenomenon is huge, by the way. Huge as far as the predictability of it. That is to say, almost no matter how you define in a good mood, and it doesn't matter how you got there or how you define it. If you're in a good mood, you're more helpful. And by helpful, I could mean just about anything. I mean, define helpful in almost any way imaginable. And so people in a good mood, no matter why they're that way, no matter how you define it, are helpful no matter how you define helpful. So it's a pretty robust outcome. Well, we also, in some ways, we help people because of like the reciprocity norm, an expectation that people will help, not hurt. That is, people that have helped them. So if somebody has helped you, there's an expectation that you will then help them later. And so there was a story of Androcles and the lion, and if memory serves, Androcles gets thrown in with his lion, and this lion's got a and so Androcles helps him out, right? Pulls that thorn right out of there. And later on, when it turns out Androcles was an early Christian, they throw him into the arena with the lions, and then the lion actually protects Androcles because that's what helping is all about, right? Or the social responsibility norm is an expectation that people will help those in need. And again, one of the rewards we get from helping is A, we look good to other people, and B, if we don't help, we look really shitty to other people. And so, in the negative sense, helping removes the shitty look, or whatever. I don't know what that is. Okay? What was this one? Again, level of publicity, whether you give a public or, yeah, whatever. You read your book, alright? That's why you got a book. As a general rule, females tend to help both males and females about equally. Males, on the other hand, tend to offer help more to females. Females tend to seek help more often. And I'm not sure why, but I'm going to tell you, I know it's a cliche, but my God, my wife cannot drive without asking for directions. It's like, I know where we're going. Just ask. Is it so difficult to ask? Why do I want to ask? It's right. You just got to get over this hill. It's about 200 yards down. Just drive for. Just drive. And she pulls the car over and unrolls the window. And I'm like, where's the place we need to go to? And then it's right over there, 200 yards. I'm like, oh, good. Sorry. Yeah, you gotta imagine the scenario. She just can't help it. Men, we don't like to ask for help. It's a sign of weakness, right? It's a sign of we can't take care of ourselves or something. As a general rule, females tend to be more helpful than males. These are just generalities, of course. Go back to your attribution theory. When we see someone in need of help, we make an attribution as to why they need help. This is pretty good. Here, let me briefly read this and then give the example. If the cause of their distress is external and uncontrollable, we feel sympathy for the person and will help them. If the cause of their distress is internal and controllable, then we do not feel sympathy for the person and we tend not to help. This is, of course, a problem because of the way we make our attributions. Let's say, for example, a man gets sick and falls down in the subway. Okay, now, if you're a cynical New Yorker, you're probably going to attribute that behavior to getting drunk or drugged, right? And it's like, if somebody is laying on the ground because they're drunk or on drugs, I've just attributed their behavior to something that they can control and it's their fault, so I don't feel sympathy and I don't help them, okay? Well, what if the guy really was sick? And so what we find is that if somebody is really sick, then we'll help them. And so we're going to get to this process in a little while here. We're going to talk this interesting graphic. Where is it? It's somewhere down there. Anyway, we're gonna lay out this interesting graphic, and we're gonna talk about the steps to helping. But ultimately, there's an attribution thing going on. If you need help because you did something that put you into that position, I don't have sympathy. But if you need help because of something that was beyond your control, I might have sympathy and I might help. Okay? Social exchange theory takes into account not only the rewards from helping, but also the costs. Clearly, as in Kitty Genevieve's scenario, there were definitely potential costs to helping Kitty Genevieve. I mean, the dude is a knife-wielding rapist. I mean, I'm not sure if you can understand the potential costs of helping Kitty Genevieve, okay? But clearly there's danger. Part of the cost of helping involved time. I'm driving down the highway and you see somebody who is trying to fix a tire, and you can just see they just don't know what the hell they're doing. Should you stop? And it's like, well, boy, you know, I'll get to another classic study on this, but man, I really got to get home and start dinner. What about the effort involved? Okay, it really does take some effort to get up and out of your chair and go downstairs and everything else. But the last one is kind of silly sounding, but yet so real, is the embarrassment factor. If you go to help somebody and they don't really need help, it's really kind of embarrassing. We're going to talk about the the attribution part, but the labeling part. But if you see a situation and you view it as an emergency, but you find that it's not, you're going to look pretty stupid, you know, when you go to help somebody that goes, dude, what are you doing? You know, I mean, you're feeling a little odd about that. Okay, so why do we help? As we said, that whole concept of altruism, which was it flies in the face of evolutionary theory, but as a general rule, when it comes to altruism, going back to those vervet monkeys, they go, ooh, right? Here's the drill. These vervet monkeys, they live in a troop of, let's just pick 100 individuals. Now, these 100 individual vervet monkeys are not random 100 individual vervet monkeys. It's not a bunch of group of random monkeys stuck together. They're a big giant family over there, okay? So what happens is when this monkey goes, ooh, he puts himself at risk. That was my target, by the way. He puts himself at risk, but what happens is he increases the probability that his mother will survive, increases the probability his father, his brother, his cousins, his uncles, his aunts, his sisters. I don't know how many more I missed, okay? And so, though it increases the probability of death, and therefore, by definition from strict evolutionary theory, such behavior ought to wash away. Any behavior that increases the probability of death, it ought to wash away because the genetic material that codes for that behavior will disappear, right? However, that the genetics which code for that behavior will also be carried by mom, dad, brother, sister, and they are being protected in this scenario. And so that genetic code, or the genetics which code for the altruistic will in fact carry on from generation to generation. We just need to think about evolution not on the basis of the individual organism, but instead at the level of the genetic material which creates the individual organism. Okay? We tend to help people that are more similar to ourselves. I mean, even if it's not a life or death scenario, we're more likely to help people that in our group. Even if you take two groups and you just artificially, you're the A's and you're the B's, and you put them in these artificial groups, and then you're like, how much should we help each person? And it's like, if I'm an A, I'm going to help the A's. It's like, okay, that's craziness. And here, I already said this. Altruism, best explained, it's selfish from a genetic perspective. That's kind of a neat concept, selfish from a genetic perspective. Likewise, though, with altruism or working together. In a coalition, each member benefits from the group's actions, but only if every member does their part. So we find that a coalition is, well, a little different than altruism, but it's helping other people. Let's say in a coalition, well, let's say you're a caveman or a cavewoman or whatever it is I got out there in TV land here. And what happens is, boy, you're hankering for some mastodon meat, dude. You're like, man, I could have myself a good mastodon steak. Think circa Fred Flintstone, man. I would like that. But the problem is, at Mastodon, it's just too big for me to catch on my own, isn't it? There's no possible way I can deal with that. So here's the deal. If I work together, if I cooperate, we'll get to cooperation in the next, I think, in the peacemaking chapter. We'll take it in more detail. But if I'm able to cooperate with others, in particular my relatives, but if I'm able to cooperate and work together with them, we can all share in the rewards. And it's a scenario where if I don't work together with you, we have no chance of ever making it through this. Reciprocal altruism is this concept of taking turns with altruistic acts. So it's not really, I mean, it looks altruistic at the moment. I'm scratching your back because it helps you because you have an itchy back. But guess what? My turn is coming next, okay? And we find that tit for tat is the most evolutionarily stable pattern of decision making. They've demonstrated this act of reciprocal altruism called tit for tat in, boy, I mean, some of the research I have read, they find it in communities of molds. You know, these two molds that live next to each other, and they can secrete hormones, and this hormone or secrete chemicals that help this one to expose itself better to light, and then this one will like return the favor. It's like, you find it in the level of mold. So this is pretty deep in our evolutionary ancestry. All right, why else might we help? Empathy, the vicarious experience of another's feelings. Being able to put yourself in another person's shoes. Whatever. Anyway, here's another good quote, by the way. I'm not sure who Thomas Macaulay is, but a true measure of our character is what we would do if we were never found out. Okay? And sometimes, I don't know, I mean, like, say, for example, I was at a musical, Peter Pan musical the other day at the Dallas Performing Arts Center, or whatever the heck it's called, I don't know, and we're in there, and they have a list of donors, this year's donors and who donated, and it's filled with people's names and stuff, but you know what, at the $250,000 donation level is anonymous. I'm like, dude, really? You gave $250,000 to the Dallas Summer Musicals? I don't understand. Whatever. How about personality factors? And I already hinted at you that we would like to think that some people are just more helpful people than others, but that doesn't make sense because, as I said, what are the odds that all 38 of Kitty Genevieve's neighbors? Like I said, I dig it. Maybe this one man there's some personality factor about him, but all 38 of Kitty Genevieve's neighbors, that just becomes gibberish. That doesn't even make sense. All right, so now here's a classic study. Latane and Dabbs. Bib Latane and somebody Dabbs. Anyway, they did a lot of different studies. But on 1,497 separate occasions in 3 cities, 145 different people dropped objects in elevator in front of 4,813 bystanders. And then they waited to see who would help them pick up the objects. Okay? And what they found is that the individuals were less likely to help as a number of people in the elevator increases. Okay? And they call this diffusion of responsibility. It's not my problem because there is so many others out there. So, Bib Latane and... For some reason I keep thinking Latane and Darley. I don't know why. I guess John Darley worked with him on some other work. But anyway... Here's the basic prediction, and let us, in fact, look at this from the eyes of Kitty Genevieve's scenario. Okay, number one, in order for help, helping is at the far right side. Whether you try to help is at the far right side. In order to achieve the act of helping, we have to pass all of these little hurdles. The first hurdle, starting at the bottom left, is we have to notice the event. Okay? If you don't even notice it is happening, you're never going to help. So, thinking about Kitty Genevieve's, 38 neighbors did witness it, but assumingly, I mean, if it's a Queens apartment building, there's a heck of a lot more than 38 neighbors. There's probably 150 neighbors, which means, quick math, 112 of them didn't notice. And so clearly those 112 fell down into the no helping part of this scenario, right? I mean, and that makes sense. Okay, next. And of the 38 that did notice the incident, do they interpret it as an emergency? And it seems kind of crazy. It's like a knife-wielding rapist, right? But here's the deal: interpret as an emergency. I'm gonna tell you the again, cynical. I spent 5 years living out in New York. New Yorkers are some kind of crazy shit, man. And I can imagine now. It's 3 in the morning, and Kitty Genovese is coming home. Now we don't know. I mean, but if she works in a bar, she's probably not coming home to a high-rise penthouse, right? She's probably coming home to a kind of a bad neighborhood, and it's 3 in the morning, and you know, roaming on the streets of New York at 3 in the morning. Do you know what you got? You got pimps, prostitutes, and drug dealers. Okay, that's really what you got roaming around at 3 in the morning, and consumers of pimps, prostitutes, and drug dealers. Consumers of whatever. And so what you find is that it does, in fact, actually makes sense that out of those 38 people, I wouldn't be surprised if at least 10 of them go, you know what, I bet you that's just a prostitute and her pimp, you know? And remember, we already said it. People are like, attribution, if you're in your scenario because of something you did, then it's not my problem, or something like this. Or they can imagine, you know, she's just being melodramatic, that's just her boyfriend and they're having a fight out there. You know, I can imagine, honestly, I could imagine such a scenario at 3 in the morning in New York in a slightly bad neighborhood. I can picture that happening. At least 10 out of the 38 would not view it as an emergency. The next step, let's say 28 people are left that in fact have noticed it and do say, you know what, there's actually something going on here. Well, let's look at those and think about it. Assume responsibility. Okay, here's what it comes down to. Okay, Mr. Smith is looking out the window and he's like, okay, you know, she needs some medical help. She really does. I mean, look at that. She's bleeding. But look at, I see Mrs. Jones over there, and she is a nurse. So she's way more qualified than me. I don't think I really am responsible for this thing because clearly Mrs. Jones is way more qualified than me. Okay? Meanwhile, Mrs. Jones is looking out the window going, that young lady needs help. But I'm telling you something. That is a knife-wielding crazy dude out there. There is no way I am going out there. Look at Mr. Smith. I know Mr. Smith. He goes to the gym every single day. Mr. Smith is way more qualified to handle this than I am. Okay? And so Mr. Smith and Mrs. Jones, they both sort of assume the other one's going to be responsible for multiple reasons, and they cancel each other out. Okay? And so now, only if all of these hurdles have been passed successfully will somebody try to help. Okay? And again, even these aren't necessarily true because, as we said, there's also the attribution factor, the attribution component. I don't think she deserves my help or something like that, right? And, you know, that's unfortunate, cruel fact of our world. And so it's all of these hurdles together that must be passed before. And so given this type of a scenario, it does in fact seem reasonable to conclude that 38 people would not help Kitty Genovese. Alright, the bystander effect is a finding that a person is less likely to provide help when there are other bystanders. Why? Because there's less, you're less likely to interpret a situation as needing help if others are present. Because, of course, here's the drill. I'm gonna, yeah, here, there's a video here that's really cool. You should watch this video. It's really an interesting study. I think this was the Latane and Darley study. And, in this thing, what they did is a variety of different studies, but the basic premise was this. They would put people into a room with a survey to fill out. So people are put into a room, put into a chair, here's a clipboard, here's a pen, fill in these questions. Very simple. At some point, okay, the room has 2 doors. The door that you just walked in and another one that looks like it might, I mean, it's not labeled, but it looks like it might lead to a utility closet or something like that. You can't tell for sure, but that's the kind of thing it looks like. And you're just sitting there, da-da-da-da-da, and at some point, they pump smoke underneath the door, that other door that they hadn't just come through. They start pumping smoke through there. The question is, after the smoke starts pouring out, how long before somebody is, you know, going to say, hey, you got smoke coming out over here, you know, something like that. And so the purple line is people when they're filling out this survey all by themselves. After 1 minute of smoke coming in the room, 40% of people have in fact found the experimenter to tell them something's wrong. After 2 minutes, 50% have. After 3 minutes, 7, whatever. After 4 minutes, 70% have. So 70% of people report this, which is kind of creepy. That means 30% of people just don't say a word. Whatever. So now put them in a group of 3. 3 people sitting there, okay? But here's the key. In these 3 people groups, this is a trick. 2 of the people work for the researcher, and in fact are told to ignore the smoke. Okay? And so there's only 1 person sitting there. Will that 1 person report the smoke? Okay? After 1 minute, only 10% report the smoke. After 2 minutes, after 3, after 4, after 5 minutes, only 30%. After 6 minutes, only 40% of people even report that there's smoke coming into the room, even though in the videos they clearly show these people are basically coughing. Just they can't even breathe. The smoke is so thick in the room. And yet only 40% even say a word. Why is that? Because the people in this group in particular are looking around and they're like, look at this guy over here. I mean, I'm sitting in, there's some ambiguity here. Is this an emergency? Remember the whole, is it an emergency thing? And they're looking around and they're like, he's not saying anything. He's not saying anything. Wouldn't I look really stupid? Remember the cost of helping? Wouldn't I look really stupid if I go in there and I say, hey, you got this problem going on when it's really not a big deal? I'd look kind of silly, wouldn't I? And so this is a clear example of why this hurdle of assume responsive, or interpret as emergency rather, is often not met, because you could also imagine the same type of a scenario where there's 3 people in the room and all 3 of them are naive participants and they're still looking at each other. I mean, they haven't been instructed to ignore it, like in that one study, but still they're looking and they're like, dude, he's not panicking. She's not panicking. I guess it's not really an emergency, right? I guess it must not really be a problem. All right. And so here's a bunch of studies he did. They did follow-up studies in, oh boy, all different parts of the world. They did where they dropped pens, how many, who would help them, and whether the person was blind, whatever. Read them all. It's very interesting what kinds of help different people in different parts of the world are willing to give, and who, in which scenarios they'll do so. It's an interesting study. It's a little bit off to the side here, but it's an interesting graphic to see cross-cultural helping. Just like the, right, and remember the observation of an aggressive model, think Bandura. The observation of an aggressive model can lead to increased aggression. The observation of a helpful model can lead to more helping behavior. So they set up a scenario where they show on the LA freeway, they have a person with a flat tire, and somebody's helping them fix the flat tire, and then a quarter mile up the road, somebody else has a flat tire, and if you put that first, that observation behind then the need of help, people are much more likely to help after they just watch somebody else helping. Or if you plant it, if the person in front of you puts money into the bucket at the Salvation Army for Christmas, you're more likely to follow it than if the person in front of you doesn't. Okay, so that's a truism. Although I bet you some of that is a guilt mechanism, by the way. That, well, whatever. Go on. All right, here's another classic. Here's Darley and Batson. Darley and Latane. Bib, Latane, and Darley. There's that same Darley. They did this classic study. They took seminary students. Number one, I'm an alright person. I'm a pretty good guy, but I believe that a priest is supposed to be better than me. Okay? A man of the cloth is in many ways supposed to have a higher moral standard. It's supposed to be, and therefore, by definition, taking it a step back, a seminary student should be a better person than I am. I mean, I guess I'm naive and asking a lot, but therefore, I have high standards for seminary students. So here we go. They the students were told that they were going to give a lecture on one of two topics. One was either you're going to go and give a lecture on the parable of the Good Samaritan, which of course is the basic story where Jesus comes in out of the desert and he comes into Samaria, and he goes to the woman and says, I need water for my mule, horse, camel. Dang, I gotta read my Bible again. But anyway, she gives him all kinds of help. Okay, lovely. And so basically it's a love thy neighbor kind of a feel-good kind of thing. And or that they were told you're going to go give a lecture on something completely and utterly different. Okay, so one is literally you're going to go give a lecture on helping other people, helping strangers, and the how God wants us to help all of God's children, or something like this. Okay, all God's children are the same in your eyes, or something. So it created 4 different scenarios. Okay, either you're going to give a lecture on the Good Samaritan, and oh, hurry up, it's in another building across campus, and you got to be there right now, or they were told it was a parable of the Good Samaritan you're going to talk about, and you're not in a hurry. Or it's a different sermon, and you're in a hurry. Or it's a different sermon, and you're not in a hurry. So it's like, would the parable of the Good Samaritan, I mean, wouldn't you be like, Jesus taught us to help, and we're supposed to, and God's children, and etc.? Well, it's crazy, because if people were in a hurry, and these are seminary students, what happens now? They're running across campus, and across the path that they had to follow to get from building to building, there's a person sick laying next to the path. I mean, you know? And here's the deal. If these seminary students, who, by the way, are supposed to be better people than me, did I tell you about them? If they were told, hurry, you have to get there, it doesn't matter what sermon they were going to be preparing, they did not stop and help a sick person laying next to the path. They just walked right over them, right past them, and in fact, in other, like I said, not just next to the path, but in certain versions, they actually put the sick person across the middle of the path, so that you would have to, and literally these seminary students would step over the top of a sick person, so that they could go give the sermon on the parable of the Good Samaritan. All right, now, I don't know about irony, but that might be irony, okay? So it's kind of crazy. If you're in a hurry, man, the cost of helping becomes amazingly high, doesn't it? And in today's, by the way, in today's modern world, everything is in a hurry, isn't it? Everything is in a hurry and getting worse and worse and worse. And that just, it does not bode well for helpfulness in the future. Similarity is conducive to liking and conducive to helping. They did some studies here. Let's say, for example, there was one where they had people wearing Manchester United or Liverpoolians. I don't remember the name of the soccer team in Liverpool, but whatever. They were wearing shirts for the soccer teams, and they were at, like, I can't remember how it worked, but it turned out that if a person coming out of the stadium had a Liverpool or a Manchester United shirt on, and the person in the parking lot needed help wearing a Manchester United shirt, they would help them. But if this person wearing a Manchester United shirt walks out of the stadium and a person wearing a Liverpool shirt needed help, he just said, forget it, I ain't helping you, you're a Liverpool fan. Can you imagine that based on the shirt that you're wearing will determine whether or not you deem somebody worthy of helping or not? Craziness. Or here they give one where, let's say, they morphed people's pictures, and it was crazy. Let's say, for example, the participant is a person on the far left, okay? And then what they did was they took a random person on the far right, and then they took the two images and they merged them together to make the person in the middle. And so now this participant on the far left here has said, which of these two ladies would you be more willing to help? And she's much more willing to help the one in the middle, who in fact is created by morphing her own picture into it. So who are we most willing to help? Ourselves. That's awesome. That's a good finding. All right, so here's that same image. First off, you have to notice the event. Let's say, for example, in that study with the smoke-filled room, when there are other people in the room, the norm is to look straight down at your paper, okay? You don't look around the room when there's other people there, or you're less likely to, okay? So if there are other people there, it's more likely. So that does help to explain why people in that study, the smoke-filled room study, did not in fact help. Okay? Interpret it as an emergency. If you're not sure that an event is an emergency and others are around, what would you do? Obviously, Kitty Genovese, but it's the same kind of a thing with much domestic violence. Do you really want to interfere in a scenario on the street? A couple is arguing with each other. Do you really want to interfere with that? I mean, are you approaching a domestic violence scenario, or are you just two people fighting with each other and it doesn't really mean anything? Okay, so clearly you have to interpret it as an emergency, and it's not always simple. And then third, like we said, take responsibility. You have to take responsibility, even if it's clear that it is an emergency. And if you're the only one around, I mean, if you're going to have a heart attack, there's two options. Have it in front of one person or have it in front of 10 people. I'd recommend having it in front of a single person. That's the way you're going to get an ambulance to come help you, okay? So another way, though, is because the more people there are, this diffusion of responsibility. So again, here's a couple of videos for you to check out. But in one classic study, this woman, she goes up and she spreads her stuff onto a blanket. She starts playing her radio really loud and obnoxious. And a couple minutes later, she gets up and she walks over probably to the restroom or something. She leaves her radio on the blanket. And a guy, I mean, it's so obvious to the people in the blankets around him that, this woman, this blanket. And this guy just sort of walks past this woman's blanket, just picks up the radio, and just continues to walk. And I was like, guess what people do? When this happens, people are like, hey, wait, you can see the reactions they're having. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't right. And then the woman comes back, she goes, where's my radio? And they were like, well, and they don't even have an excuse, Well, okay, same scenario, but now this woman, just, she comes in, puts down a blanket, starts playing the radio obnoxiously, and then she's going to go to the restroom or something. And just before she goes to the restroom, she says to the person on the blanket next to him, hey, can you watch my radio? And then she goes. That mere act of, hey, can you watch my radio, is enough to sort of put a responsibility, a social responsibility. Now that man walks up and picks up the radio and continues to walk. The people on the other blanket, they jump up, and in some of the videos that you can see when you look it up on the internet, I mean, literally they will tackle this guy and start hitting him and in your face, aggressive, to get back that radio. It's just really amazing. They've done similar studies, where they've had falling off a ladder, people are in a room and all of a sudden, oh my God, I fell off the ladder, and in another room, and are you going to go help them? It depends on how many people are in the room. And another one, they had one study, they had people in a conversation, let's say, three-way calling or something on your telephone, but they had like 10-way calling or something. And it turned out, they do this and people don't know exactly where other people in the conversation are. And you have one of the people have a seizure in the middle of this conversation. And if there's like 5 people in this conversation, the 4 people not having a seizure are all like going, what's going on? But they don't actually do anything to help, okay? But if there's this little conversation with just 2 people and this one has a seizure, then that person jumps right out and says, hey, experimenter, we need to find this person, we need to find them. Likewise, we find the same type of diffusion of responsibility going away in small towns. As I said, New Yorkers are cynical, and they're less likely to feel responsible because there's millions of people and you're anonymous, okay? You're an anonymous face in the crowd. But in a small town, they did a classic study. They took letters. They were all addressed and everything else with stamp on them, and they dropped them on the ground right outside of a mailbox, okay? Who's going to, just pick up the letters and put them into the mailbox? And if it's like New York City, basically nobody. People just step on them. Nothing. But if it's a small town, people walking past, they just stop, they pick them up, they put them into the mailbox. It's just what you do, all right? So in a small town where there's less anonymity and less diffusion of responsibility, there's more helping. I'm back to personality traits. What? How am I back to personality traits? Yeah, whatever. Faced with identical situations, some people will respond helpfully, others won't bother. Perhaps if you had to pick a personality factor, is need for social approval. People that are high in need for social approval, if you can imagine such a personality factor, are more likely to be helpful. But nothing really. It's almost always situations more than anything. Oh, this is creepy. I've been doing some research on this one, talking about social responsibility. And again, I'm going to get to social responsibility in the next chapter on, I think it's the next chapter. Yeah, it's the next chapter on social traps and stuff. But intrinsically religious people are only slightly more likely to be helpful in spontaneous situations. So when it comes to spontaneous helping, oh my God, there's an emergency, do something. However, religious people are more likely to be helpful when they plan ahead, like volunteering. Right? Weekly attenders of church, which is about 24% of Americans, give 48% of all philanthropic contributions. So when they can plan ahead, they're the ones, I mean, clearly it's the missionaries that go out and do all of these wonderful things and stuff. But when it comes to actual spontaneous helping, a little bit better, but not really, okay? Like the parable of like the story with the seminary students. Moods are interesting. Good mood tends to increase helping, as I already said. I can't even remember all of the scenarios. Tipping is higher on sunny days. So if you're going to be if you're a waitress and you can pick your shifts, make sure you pick those shifts that are, right? Look at your 10-day forecast and plan accordingly. Why? I don't know. Maybe I like the one that I like to explain the feel good do good phenomenon is sort of like a global a cosmic karma. No, a global reciprocity. The universe put me in a good mood, and it's my job to pay back that good mood or something like that. Okay, so I like that. It's an interesting notion. What about guilt? They did this one study. Boy, I got to remember the details on this one, but it was cute. They had people. Okay, so a woman's walking down the street. She's carrying a bag of groceries. And she stops somebody and says, "Oh, can you take my picture here on this bridge?" Okay, so she sets down the bag of groceries, and this person goes to take their picture. And one of two things happens. Either they take their picture and give back the camera, or they design it so that when they take the picture, the camera falls apart. Okay? You broke the camera. You were helping me out, taking my picture, and it broke. Okay. So, oh, don't worry about it. It's okay. So now, in both scenarios, the woman picks up her bag of groceries and proceeds to start walking when the bag rips open and all of her contents of her bag drop onto the ground. Okay? What are you going to do? Who's going to help? And it turns out that if somebody felt that they had just broken the camera, they were much more likely to help this woman pick up her groceries. Okay? So guilt also increased helping. And so maybe the helping allowed you to alleviate the guilt, right? That it's that whole negative reinforcement thing we talked about earlier. Sometimes we help not to give ourselves positive things, but to take away bad things, the negative reinforcement. Anonymity, as we said, anonymity is related to helping, and so anything you can do to reduce a person's anonymity will in fact increase their likelihood of helping somebody. Okay. Again, like we said, people that feel anonymous are more likely to be aggressive or break rules and stuff. Related to the group size effect, the smaller the group, the less anonymous we are, and again, it's related to the small town thing, right? The smaller the town you live in, the less anonymous you are because everybody knows your name. How can we increase helping? Door in the face technique. This is classic. After someone first turns down a large request, then see, they've done these. We in fact talked about these same studies with Foot in the Door, where we work in one direction. But here's one where if you just want people to volunteer at a homeless shelter, first you ask them. Boy, maybe these weren't the ones, but whatever. Door in the face. What you do is you ask for. Let's say you need to borrow $500 from your folks, right? So what you do is you go to your folks and say, "Mom, Dad, can I borrow $5,000?" And they're like, hell no, son. I love you, but not that much. Okay, well, how about 500 then? All right. All of a sudden, 500 seems much more reasonable in the face of 5,000. So door in the face means literally slam that 5,000 at them. And when they're like, oh shit, no, you're like, okay, how about now I ask you for what I really wanted? 500. Okay, it makes the 500 seem much more feasible. Yeah, you can increase helping by education, just through education. Okay. Teaching about moral inclusion. Moral inclusion is regarding others as within one circle of moral concern. That is to say, moral exclusion, which is sort of the default, is the perception of certain individuals or groups as outside the boundary within which one applies moral values and rules of fairness. Okay. And this is related to the in-group, out-group, and us versus them, because people that are in your out-group in many ways they don't belong to your group. I got that. But we don't know them, we don't understand them, and in extreme cases they are inhuman to us. They don't exactly exist to us. And since they're outside of my in-group and they don't really exist to me, they're not in that that circle that I would apply my moral reasoning to, all right? Because they're not really humans per se, or they're not ones that I would consider that. So what we find is, say, for example, you need to humanize the people in the out-group to increase helping. And so some of these classic feed the children commercials on television, they'll of course show you the pictures of, here's a picture of the child that you will help, and we'll send you a personal story and letter each month and stuff, if anybody ever remembers those Feed the Children with Sally Struthers. And the idea is, by personalizing the one that you're helping, you're sort of bringing them into your inner circle, and if somebody's in your inner circle, then the rules of morality will apply to them, because they are in fact somehow humanized once they enter that circle. Pro-social models can increase altruistic behaviors. Yeah, you give kids a dose of Sesame Street, they're much more likely to help. Or children can learn to be altruistic, friendly, and self-controlled by looking at television programs depicting such behavior patterns. Yeah, National Institute of Mental Health. Or here, they have kids watch an episode of Lassie where Lassie is helping, and then the number of seconds that they spend helping, I think it was picking up toys, almost 100 seconds helping to pick up toys. If they watched an episode of Lassie that didn't have helping, if they had watched an episode of the Brady Bunch, you know, you see that the kids just did not help pick up toys nearly as much, but they did more when they saw it before. What else can we do? We talked about this. Teach moral inclusion, model altruism, practice it, attribute helping, learn about, undo the restraints on helping, reduce ambiguity, enable guilt and concern for self-image. Oh, that makes me think, I was at a church one time that knew the whole trick about this, the whole anonymity thing and increasing guilt and shit, and they published every week, they published a list of every single church member and every single donation made by every single church member. I left that church really quick, okay? I did not dig that. It was a clever technique, right? A clever technique to maximize the helping that you give to your church, but it just didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like a Christian thing to do. All right, whatever. So I believe that this will bring us up to the point where you'll be taking exam 3, if you recall. After this one, we're going to have one more chapter that does in fact fit well with this material, but because of the way the number of chapters in the book, we had to make a break. So this is the end of the material for exam 3. So make sure you get out there and study, and go get 'em, Tiger. I don't know what that means.